This week on Merchants of Change, we've got Sean Hurd. Sean spent 22 years in the U.S. Army, the bulk of that time in Special Forces as a Ranger and Green Beret. Sean transitioned out of military service into a successful sales career without any outside help and shares in my mission to pay it forward to the next generation. Sean is going to be helping us teach and train military veterans who want to become professional salespeople. Here he is, Sean Hurd. I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder of the Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes into being a professional technology salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change. What's up, kid? How we doing, Sean?
Good, man. Glad to be here today.
We're really excited to have you. Today on the show, we got Sean Hurd. Thank you for being on the show. And Sean, this is a big deal for us. This is a show that we built for new sellers and people considering a career in sales. And our first mission when I started Shift Group was to help elite athletes become elite sales professional. And as you know, we're expanding to include our country's military veterans into our mission, because it's always been about helping high character individuals use that character and mindset that made them unique in whatever they were doing and help them apply it to what I believe to be the best career in the world, which is sales. So usually our guests are former athletes. We're going to start having more veterans, with you being our first guest in the space. And we try to get people that have had success in sales. So what we like to start with when we have athletes is their sports career. So I think on the military side, it makes sense to do the same. So I'd love to talk about your transition period and working in sales, but starting with that Army experience. So before we jump in, can you talk a little bit about what you're envisioning for our program for veterans?
Yeah, so like JR said, I'm the veteran coordinator now for Shift Group, and I'm really excited that you're starting in your team a veteran vertical to help former people that serve the United States military get into tech sales. And the reason why it hits really close home to me is because I did that about 2.5 years ago, completely on my own with zero help. And it was very painful, to the point where like I almost gave up, which is like very uncharacteristic of me because I'm pretty hard-headed and I don't really give up that often, but I was about to throw in the towel. So when you told me what you were doing with athletes, I thought it was going to be, an easy thing to kind of replicate with the vets, because like you said, we share a lot in common. And if you look at some of the real high performing veterans in the military, I don't know if I ever told you this or not, a lot of them have a strong athletic background prior to joining the military. A lot of guys I served with were wrestling, state wrestling champs, baseball, football, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of attributes from the sports world that transition into, being a high performer in the military. And so that when you told me we were going to start this vertical, I was like, this is going to be easy.
I couldn't agree more. It's such a logical next step for the business and for our customers, right? These are the type of people they're looking for. So I'm very excited. All right, let's get into your background, Sean. So we always start with a very broad question. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite and least favorite memories of your time in the U.S. Army?
Yeah, so I did 22 years, and I did a pretty long career in the Army. You only have to do 20. I did 2 extra years because I made a certain rank, and I had to do 2 extra years and get the pay from that rank as retirement. But did some hard stuff. I started off in the 75th Ranger Regiment, which I don't know if you ever seen that movie Black Hawk Down. It's this like a elite infantry unit. It's the Army's elite infantry unit. And so that was what kind of laid the foundation for my success in the military, because it's a super, very hard unit to be a new person in. Kind of like being an SDR in sales, but on steroids. It's like very hard. So I made it through that. After that first like 3-4 years in Ranger Battalion, there was nothing in the military that I couldn't do, because it was just a super challenging time. And I see you talk about it all the time in your content about making it through that first year of sales. So I had this similar experience there, being a new guy in an elite infantry unit. And they really do everything they can to test you and get you to either prove that, you're worthy of being there, or, they try to get you out of there, because the end game is like going to combat, and they don't want people they can't trust on the battlefield.
So, I think we all look back at like adversity that we get through fondly, but at the time it's really hard. Would you say that like that first experience is kind of both your least favorite as well as your favorite time when you look back at your whole 22-year career?
Yeah, because like it's the same as you probably in your hockey career. The worst times make the best stories, and when you get with all your really close friends, you talk about the hardest times, and those are the ones that you remember and you really actually enjoy later on in life. So yeah, I think it's similar to kind of what you talk about all the time.
When you look back at your time in the Army and some of your like favorite teammates that you worked with, what like traits and characteristics come to mind for those top favorite teammates you've had?
So for me, it was always I really like teammates that can push through adversity, and the ones that do that seem to the ones that really have that under control are the ones that can help other people that are struggling to push through adversity, because you get put in some pretty tough situations in the military, especially in special operations, and the ones that have shines are the ones that easily make it through adversity, and they pull people along with them. Does that make sense? Because like nobody's perfect, and everybody has like a bad day or a moment where they don't think they can do something. And the guys that are able to, not only be good themselves, but pull people along are the ones that I really looked up to throughout my career.
Absolutely. Yeah. And same goes in corporate America. And I think in sports, those leaders that they don't need a title to be considered leaders, really. Speaking of leadership, like what do you think your leadership from your special forces days, like how would they describe Sean Hurd?
I think and I talk about this a lot. You grow in the military, it's a long career. And if you stay the whole time, you kind of grow through what we call the 3 phases of leadership, which is tactical, organizational, and strategic. So like tactical is like, you're down in doing the basic tasks, leading at the bottom, not the bottom, but the core level of what your organizational is doing. And that's the easy days, right? That's just like being at the right place, right time, right uniform, executing the basics at a high level. And then you move on to what we call organizational leadership I think that's the most important leadership in the military, because an organizational leader, number one, he has to be able to take the strategic leadership guidance, get it, think about it, and then somehow try to translate that down to the tactical level. And then he has to take what the tactical level is feedback, and get it from them like think about it and then translate it back up to the strategic level thinker. So you're kind of like a middleman, constantly moving information from the top down and the down and from the bottom back up, right? So that, and then that's the most important part. I think in a sales organization, it'd be like an director of sales or something like that. He's in the middle of the SDRs and AEs and the VP or the CRO. And then at the very end of my career, I just barely touched it, but I started getting into strategic levels where you're talking about like national mission objectives and stuff like that. And that's where kind of like you're away from the tactics and you're just more, thinking and strategizing and stuff like that. So I would say like the favorite part of my career was that organizational thing. And I think what they would say about me when I was in that I, that's where I think I learned, to look through the lens, of the person that I'm leading. Because when I was at like the tactical level, I didn't really care about any of that stuff. It was all about getting the job done. And then so I learned empathy at the organizational, and I didn't really learn it until like, I would say 16 years in. I didn't really kind of learn empathy. And so I'd say at that level, that's where I kind of grew as a leader the most.
So you think when you were at that organizational level of leadership, the people who were underneath you would describe you as empathetic for the ones that got to know you later?
No, not at first. It was a learning curve for me because like, I ended my career, not ended, but a couple years before I ended my career, I was a senior enlisted advisor for a 600 person task force that was spread across 4 countries. And you got to think about how diverse that population is and all the issues I had. I couldn't just like solve it with like one method or one way. I had to like kind of look through the lens of every scenario. And I think that like, and we'll get into this later, but I think that's what kind of made me a great salesman, like right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, empathy is probably one of the most important characteristics you can have as a salesperson, is living in your customer's shoes. You use the word, and I talk about it too. It's different, but it's similar about the transition being painful, right? And
yeah,
for those that have never served, it's hard to relate. But like, so talking to the business leaders that we work with in the private sector, how can those folks make that transition less painful for our veterans, in your opinion?
So I think the major thing that prevents an organization from actually achieving, a lot of them have veteran initiatives, is this educating it's mostly their HR and hiring managers on a veteran's not going to meet the requirements that you put out in your job description. This is not going to happen. So if you go to an interview, for example, and they're like, "Hey, describe a time you did X, Y, and Z," and I'm like, I never did that. Like it. Like, why am I sitting here and you're asking me a question about something that I never did? And then it would get frustrating, right? And then so because they wouldn't change their playbook for a veteran who literally came from a different career, and they're changing careers, and they're giving you a chance, I think, because they have an initiative to take the interview, but they just don't have the education to take in the information that you're telling them.
Yeah, it's one thing to have a named initiative so you can put it on your website, post about it on LinkedIn. But if you're not going to do the right thing to actually capture that talent, then it's a waste of everybody's time, and you're just kind of virtue signaling a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can't ask a veteran how many times he's hit quota. Like I've never had a quota. I can say, hey, I got tasked to do X, Y, and Z, and the standard was 90% of people had to do it, and I got I can come up with some like parallel scenario, but that takes a lot of time and practice, which actually, not shameless plug, that's kind of what we're going to try to help the veterans do at Shift Group, but it's on these organizations also if they really care about hiring veterans to actually bring someone in, maybe like me or something that knows the military and helps them like break down the barriers and translate stuff. If that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. I think tech sales all of a sudden became cool like a few years ago. But like prior to that, sales in a lot of cases, sales still is like a 4-letter word for most people. Even the people that start our program, the first thing we have to do is get them over the hump of like thinking a salesperson is a used car salesperson, right? But you were unique. Like you kind of came out, it seems like, and you were pretty set on getting into sales. Like, where did your interest in sales come from?
So I have a close knit of like high school friends, that a circle that I fish with and keep in touch the last 22 years. And the most successful ones that are multimillionaires were salespeople, right? And so I was talking, when you start getting out, you start talking to people that are outside the military trying to figure out what you're going to do. And I was talking to one of my friends and he was like, hey, my wife's best friend's husband was a Navy whatever, and he's a VP of sales at Salesforce, and he makes, I don't know, you can guess, probably $400,000 a year. And I was like, he's making $400,000 a year? And I didn't know anything about SaaS or software sales, and I started just doing my typical research, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of money to be made in this market. And I just went all in on it.
And you talked about, you took it on your own, and that's something that we're trying to save people from having to do. But like, can you talk a little bit for those that are listening that maybe do want to potentially, obviously, hopefully come with Shift Group, but like, tell us about your approach to get into sales. What was that like?
So at first, I did what every veteran does, and I get a nice resume put together, and I essentially, there's these groups that teach you how to do your resume. You put all this jargon on there, and they all look the same. If you look at every veteran's resume, it's all going to be like project manager and this and that. It all looks the same, right? So I got the resume together, and I just got on LinkedIn and just applied to 500 SaaS jobs, right? Like I just hit apply. And then I was getting rejection after rejection, or, I would get one interview out of it, and I didn't know how to articulate, what I did in the military and how that applies to being, these are all SDR jobs, and how it applies to being an SDR. And it was bad, JR. It was, I didn't know what I'm doing. And then I kind of started just digging around on LinkedIn and watching certain SaaS people like maneuvering on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, I think this is like the way I got to move forward, is like, I got to network with these people behind the scenes. And then once I started networking them behind the scenes, it all started kind of coming together, if that makes sense.
It's so wild to me that somebody would see a profile like yours and your military career and not at least take an interview. Like that's just, it's crazy to me, but it is what it is. That's why we're here. That's why we're going to help. You talked about, kind of flopping on a few interviews, right? And one of the things that we spend a ton of time on, as you know, having seen our training, is crafting a narrative about your life experience and applying it to sales. We've done it really well with athletes, and now we're going to do it really well with veterans. What ended up clicking and working for you when it came to crafting your narrative in the interview process?
So the flops were all coming from, a lot of them were like, hey, it's a typical, you've interviewed thousands of people probably in your CRO days, but it's a typical, like, explain how whatever you did in the military, because they don't know, they think everybody's the same. Like, how's that gonna make you a good salesperson? And it was hard for me to put two and two together because I didn't know what a good salesperson was. Like, I had no idea. Nobody told me what a good SaaS salesperson is. And so what actually got me over the hump, and I'll give him a shout out, is there was this guy that was a SDR manager for Chili Piper. I don't know if you heard that company. His name was Matthew Roberts. And he was like, hey, we're not going to hire you. No way. But I like you a lot, so I'm going to help you. And then he started kind of helping me. He didn't help me like create my narrative, but he kind of helped teaching me about SaaS, right? Tech sales. So once I learned about tech sales, I was able to craft my own narrative. And I told Tom this in the pre-interview, but essentially what I would say is like, hey, I'm a senior level special forces operator. You know, we're experts in culture. That's what we do as Green Berets. I've been all over the world. And what I do is I have to convince foreign partner forces, foreign military, even U.S. State Department officials that run these countries that we need to do X, Y, and Z in support of U.S. foreign policy objectives. And sometimes like X, Y, and Z was dangerous. It would put, you know, these people's lives in danger. It put their family in danger. And for like the State Department specifically, it could risk the ambassador's job or his or her reputation. You know, if we did something wrong or, you know, that you messed up or something like that. So I was like, hey, if I can do these, and this is all stuff that's like very serious and has like very serious consequences. So if I can do that at a high level for 20 years, I can sell a dialer, right? Or I could sell a contact data or whatever. And then people are like, oh, wow, that's crazy, you know, and then so I started kind of narrowing down on that kind of stuff, and I started getting farther into interviews.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, you were selling partner forces on completing objectives that were in the best interest of what you guys, what we wanted U.S. foreign policy was. That's sales. Like, you're just, the persona is different and the value prop is different, but that makes a ton of sense on how you spun that.
Yeah.
I got to assume, and I know you and I have talked about this, so I know you feel the same way, but there's obviously some preconceived notions when someone sees veteran that they're assuming, like hiring managers or talent acquisition people. How do you think these companies are traditionally viewing veterans when it comes to hiring?
I think they view them through the war movie that they watched, right? So the Saving Private Ryans and, you know, the Black Hawk Downs and all that. And, you know, I am kind of the people that you see in the war movie, but you got to understand, like, there's like 200 just in the Army alone, and don't quote me on this and Google it, but I think there's like over 220 occupations that you can do in the military, right? You can do anything from being a cook, flying drones, fixing computers, satellite communications, special forces, infantry, fixing vehicles, fixing aircraft, you know, name it. It's like, it's a broad spectrum of careers. And then each one of those careers has different types of personalities, right? If you're going to go into the infantry, you know, you're going to have super A-type direct personalities. And if you're going to be a cyber warrior, you know, you're probably going to be an introvert, quiet type thinker person, right? And I'm not saying that's the standard across that job, but what I'm saying is people think that, in my opinion, that we're very direct. We don't get along with people that aren't in the military. We're very confrontational. And then a lot of people think, because they see it all plastered over the news, that we all have post-traumatic stress syndrome. We've all been to war, and we all have mental health issues. And they say they want to help veterans, but like, think about it. Like, who really wants to hire somebody that has a bunch of mental health issues, right? They're like, I don't want to deal with that. But that's not the case. Like, not everybody has PTSD, and if you do, most people like me have it under control, and you would never even know about it, right? So that's the kind of perception I think that's out there. I may be wrong, but that's kind of what I was running into. And plus, like, another thing is when we're like, you can get younger people that do like shorter tours and get out, but someone like me gets out and I'm 40, and then you got to run up against the whole age thing. And I'm like, man, I'll run. When I was an SDR at a certain company with 60 people, I was running circles around 22-year-olds, like no problem. So like I think there's like an age thing too, because we spent 22 years in a career.
We've always dealt with that, even before we went into the veteran space, with the folks that we work with that play 10 to 15 years of professional sports. And they're like, they're a little older for us. And it's like, what is wrong with you? Like, this person is dead motivated. They got kids at home. Like, they're going to do whatever it takes to be successful because of their age. And they bring to bear all this like real life maturity and life experience. So such a short-sighted view, but some people. Yeah, but
if a CRO is watching this, like, most of the ejections I would get as an SDR, because we're working in a remote environment, we're like, hey, my kids, I'm driving this, that, or whatever. I've dealt with all that. So I can easily talk to someone about, oh, I got kids too, man, or, whatever. I got a lot of life experience, and I've been around the world. And 22-year-old, nothing against them, I love them, but they just don't have that life experience. So how are you supposed to talk to 40-year-old CROs when you're 22? I mean, it happens. There's some good people that do it, but I'm saying I think it gave me a leg up, to be honest with you.
I agree. And definitely for those listening, that those preconceived notions about PTSD and, all the things that you talked about, that, we got to drop that shit. It's not true. And to your point, there's so much opportunity in our armed services that people are doing that is unique and such great life experience. You mentioned cooks. My grandfather was a cook in the Korean War, but he still brought home like a lot of experience and he was a sales guy. He sold in the food and beverage space very, very successfully for 40 years. And he told me all the time when I was little that what he learned serving in the military made him a great salesperson. So I've seen it firsthand. And we ask everybody this question, Sean. I'm actually really excited to get your take. I think it's going to mean a lot to the veterans that go through our program. As you know, we don't sign exclusive agreements with our hiring partners. So usually somebody comes through the program, they're interviewing at multiple spots. They're usually getting multiple offers. You just went through this fairly recently. How are you going to coach? How would you coach a veteran in terms of like how they're going to select their company, right? We don't like to hear, well, this company's 5K base higher, so I'm going to go there. Like, those are stupid. What are the things that you're looking for when you're helping somebody make a selection that you think are important, specifically in their first company they go work for?
So I wish I could Google this real quick, but I'm not going to because I don't want to mess up the video. But I think it's like 90% of veterans quit their first role within their first year. If it's not 90, it's high, right? It's unusually high compared to like a college grad. And the number one reason why they quit, well, there's two reasons. Number one, they don't align with the mission of the company that they go work for. And number two, they don't like the leadership structure that's in place. And a lot of times it's poor leadership, right? So I think that's the two, that stuff you need to be looking for. You need to do something that you're excited about, right? Because, for me, for example, I was traveling the world. I was busy all the time, seeing all this crazy stuff. And if I get into something that I'm not passionate about, I'm going to get bored really quickly, right? And then when you get bored, that's when bad stuff starts to happen, right? You start getting negative and stuff. And number two is like, I would say your first line supervisor, like whoever you're going to be working for, you got to really like and identify with. And it doesn't have to be someone older than you. Like I had a SDR manager that was like way younger than me, but we got along great. So I think that's the two pieces of advice I would give to somebody is like, you got to like what you're doing. And number two, you got to like your first line supervisor, because if not, we've seen a lot of leadership, man. I've seen a lot of leadership, and one thing I can't put up with is like this bad leadership. I can't stick around. I don't need to. So that's kind of the two things.
100%. I'm a big believer that actually, like, that point you just made is likely the most important, right? Like, if you could, like, listen, you're not always going to be super passionate about cybersecurity or HR tech or marketing tech. Obviously, the mission of the company is meaningful, but the product you sell, less meaningful in terms of your passion. But being around a leader that you think you can learn from, that you think cares about your success, that is going to give you the foundation so you can go and grow in those first 12 to 24 months. And then you can go and take that learning, take that foundation and go on to something that, like you did, that you can make a lot of money at, be successful in. Super important. One of the things we bonded, the way me and Sean met for everybody, was we have a very similar take when it comes to, I guess I'll say culture. Although I don't think this is real culture, right? All these people out there, and it's leadership, it's the noise on LinkedIn about like work-life balance and mental health and remote whatever, right? Like can you just talk a little bit about why like people with athletic DNA and service DNA should run like hell from those types of companies and those types of leaders?
Yeah, because the people that talk about that stuff don't talk about, so you get into sales to create revenue, and when you create revenue, you make money, right? Like this isn't an easy job. There's a lot of stress. There's quotas. You don't even know exactly what you're going to be making for the year, which causes it could cause your significant other and your family stress. How can you plan if you don't even know what you're making for the kind of, you say it all the time, it's like 30% of the deals are closed. So like 70 of it's a no. There's just a lot of drama. And if you're not revenue focused and you're focused on all the culture stuff me and you kind of push back on, then the odds are that company, number one, isn't going to be creating enough revenue for you to meet your goals. And number two, you're going to be wasting a lot of time doing stuff that doesn't matter, and which is creating revenue and getting commission checks, right? And then learning. So that was a big learning curve for me too, because I was like, this is kind of weird to me, but it seems like everybody's always happy and trying to be cool in the space with all this stuff. And then when I really got into it, I'm like, none of this matters. Like, just be a good teammate. You need to find a place where the team's tight, everybody likes each other. You can say whatever you want. I'm not talking about like sexual harassment and being racist and stuff, but I'm saying you can say whatever you want, like about the job. So, and everybody's honest with each other. You're always like critiquing, getting better. And that's what vets and athletes do. They practice, they don't do well, they get told how to fix it, and then they practice and they get better, and they practice and they get better. It's the same thing in the Army. We do a training event. It doesn't go well. You do an after action review. You go back right out there and do it again. It doesn't, and you're never happy, really. There's never like, hey, great, you won, right? So, and I think that's what athletes and vets bring to the table is like they're never happy and they're mission focused. They're not worried about all that distraction, right? Work-life balance. I saw a guy that said a quote the other day. It's like the people that talk about work-life balance aren't happy with their jobs and who they work for. So, like, if I'm happy, like with Shift Group, for example, if I'm happy being around people, I don't mind being around them, right? I don't like find ways to not be around them. So I think a lot of that stuff's just a distraction to hide the fact that they're not revenue focused, which at the end of the day, I think they're all, as we can see now, they all laid off, 30, 40% of their company because they were never revenue focused.
Culture is not like fucking cool hat day on Fridays. Culture is like what people do when nobody's looking and how they treat each other in the trenches. And like you made the point of like, be a great teammate. Sometimes being a great teammate is telling someone that they suck and saying that hey, you got to get better, man. Like we need you to be better if we're going to accomplish our goal as a team. Like, and I look back at the best teams I ever played for, and we would have knockdown, drag them out, like screaming matches with each other. Those are people whose weddings I've been in, right? Where we're like rolling on the floor wrestling because somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do. It comes down to like, not to sound corny, but it's like being accountable and being authentic are that's not like wearing a hat backwards. I know I do that a lot, but that's not being authentic. Being authentic is like really knowing what I'm good at, knowing what I'm bad at, and taking feedback to make sure that I can be the best person I can be. That's what culture is, in my opinion.
So JR I spent about a month and a half, 2 months as a SDR or team leader. I had 5 SDRs underneath me. And we were, at the company I worked at, we were required to always be on Zoom. So each SDR team leader had their own Zoom room. Your team was in Zoom. It wasn't as bad as everybody makes it out to be. You can go work out, eat, whatever. Hey, I'm going to go work out. It's like being in the office, right? Hey, I'm going to go eat. I'm going to go work out. All right, later, man. Do your thing. But what I learned is like, we were all better being there, just being honest with each other and being like, and number 2, like, hey, why'd you just fold? Like you just gave up on that cold call. Like, why? My head, well, then go walk away and go like do some jumping jacks and then come back if your head's not right. Cause you just wasted, you got that person on the phone, which is hard to do these days, and you wasted it. Right. So like and then they would go walk away, come back and book a meeting. And then so next thing you know, like everybody in this company wants to come hang out in our Zoom room because we have the most real environment in there. So that's what people want. There's a lot of hate from our generation down on like the younger millennial generation, but there's good millennials out there and they want to be held accountable and they want to be part of the culture that we were part of in the military and on college and professional sports team.
I agree. Like we all hear the old men yelling at clouds about Gen Z's entitlement. That's why Shift Group is unique, because we don't have people that are entitled. These are people that come from backgrounds that understand that you only get what you put into something. So that's a great point on the entitlement, the victimhood that we see out there today pretty prevalently. It's disappointing. Sean, we kind of close out with the 2 same questions with every guest we have. I'm actually excited to hear because I've never asked you these questions. We ask everybody to highlight a skill that they have as a salesperson that really makes them and made them elite as a salesperson specifically. What's your elite skill?
Mine's grit or determination. I just don't quit. Like if you give me a goal, I'm hitting it. Like, and I've hit every goal I've ever had in my short sales career. And I'm not lying. You can go back and ask all my coworkers. I've hit them all. Was it easy? No. Sometimes I was working, SDRs, a lot of them are paid hourly. It's a salary, but you get paid hourly. And these companies, because of HR rules and stuff, say, hey, you can only work 8 hours because of overtime and whatever. And I would just shut the clock off and then work another 5 hours because like I'm winning. Like for me, it wasn't even hit. I didn't even think about quota. Quota was easy. It was about being the top person in the organization. So that, I think that's my skill is this grit and determination to be the top person, even though I'm probably not the most skilled person.
I love that. I love that point you just made about like having quota as a goal. To me, it's like if quota is your goal, man, you're in the wrong career. My second company I ever worked with, it was really the first company I ever interviewed for because I kind of just got my first job. I did all the negotiation for my salary, my variable comp, and I kind of was about to sign. And the CEO asked me, he's like, "Don't you want to know what your quote is going to be? And I'm like, no, it doesn't fucking matter. I'm assuming it's the same as everybody else's. And if that's the case, I'm going to blow it out. I don't care what the number is. That's not why I'm here.
But that's a good point, JR. Is like, if there's one person in that organization that's hitting that number, then it's hittable. So it doesn't matter, right? I mean, here's another fun fact, and hopefully I can use this to like motivate people. Is you see a lot of like influencers in the tech sales space talk about having to learn and be slow and take your time and all that stuff. I hit when I went through my 1 week training for this SaaS company I work for. I hit the ramp quota in the 2.5 days of cold calling that we're allowed to do at the end for the month. So like, and I got 15 meetings in like 2.5 days. Had no idea what I was doing. I just like could talk to people like this, and I just work. I just stayed after work and called people. Right. So it's you don't have to go in there and be timid and slow and learn. I mean, I'm not saying you don't have a open mindset. Like I always tell people, find the best person in your organization and follow them around with a leash and copy what they're doing. It really shortens your learning curve, because like, especially in that environment, because every environment is different. So in that environment, that top person is doing what they need to do to be the top person. So just copy them essentially. But what I don't like is all these people that go in these organizations. It takes them like 6 months to like just hit quota. I'm like, that's why these companies can't make money. Sitting around waiting for people to hit quota in like 6 months. Just go in there like a madman or a madwoman and just get after it. That's my advice.
Yeah, I want to get what you just said tattooed on like my chest. If one person hits quota, the quota is hittable, because all I see are these posts of like, well, this organization, only 24% of people hit quota and it's the executive's fault. It's like, no, it's not. We make more money than freaking 99% of the country. Right? This should not be easy to do that. It should be hard. It's okay if 50% of the people hit quota. That means 50% of people are doing the work and are good enough to earn, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Love it, dude. Love it.
We had a top AE at one company I worked at who started as an SDR, and he was like, JR, he was killing it, man. And all the rest of the AEs were like, well, he gets all the renewals and he gets this and you've heard it, right? And I'm like, yeah, but he earned all that. That's his journey and his game. Like, he started off where you did as an SDR, and he didn't have like anybody that gave him that stuff. He went out and got it. So, the organizations that are like that, that's back to your question a couple questions ago. You don't want to be part of organizations that are like trying to fix the territories and all this other stuff to make everything equal. That's not why we get into sales.
No, 100%. I don't know what the parallel here is to military service, but as you know, Sean, my father is a 45-year-long, Hall of Fame hockey coach, and he used to preach to us growing up like, it's like Abe Lincoln's old quote: if you're gonna be something, be a good one, right? And the idea was like, he talked about professionalism. He said a lot of people play hockey, but there's not a lot of hockey players. And I believe that sales is a profession, and you need to carry yourself like a professional. So when I meet somebody who's really good at what they do, I call them a pro. I'm like, hey, this guy, this girl, this is a pro. So I'd love to hear, like, last question from your perspective. What does being a pro in sales, what does that mean to you?
So I think the best salespeople that I've met have created, through trial and error, they've created a process. And you can, to make that like athlete or military, they created like a way of practicing, or a standard operating procedure. They created a process, and they stuck to that process. Like it's just they're very disciplined. So number one, they put in a professional is willing to put in the amount of work that's needed to be at the top. And number two, they just don't do things willy-nilly. It's all for a purpose. So they try something, it works, they double down on it until it doesn't work, and then they find something new. They're not out there just willy-nilly just doing things with no purpose. Everything has a purpose. So a pro salesperson is someone that has a process. They're always refining that process, and they're sticking to that process. And what me and you always talk about is they're willing to do whatever it takes to be at the top of their organization.
I love it. An amateur does something till they get it right. A professional does something till they can't get it wrong. Love it. Sean, this is awesome. Going to be required listening. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for joining our team. We're so grateful and fortunate to have you. And so are the veterans that get to go through our program. Really appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, man, it was fun being here. Thank you.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.